a QVGA display, Windows Mobile 5, and a jog dial. If that spec sheet doesn't get your flag waving, you're too young to be watching this. I'm Michael Fisher, this is Pocket Now, and this is our throwback review of the Motorola Q. The summer of 2006. In America, Talladega Nights was top of the box office. Nickelback battled Hinder for butt rock supremacy, and your host for this video was busily growing the weirdest mustache in the history of Virginia Beach. But more importantly, a hotly anticipated mobile phone was hitting the market. A device poised to challenge then-incumbent RIM's BlackBerry family in the QWERTY space. A new Windows Mobile device unlike any other. That smartphone's name? The Motorola Q. The Q was Motorola's attempt to port the design aesthetic of the wildly successful original Razr to a smartphone, and it was a brilliant success. At 11.9mm thick, the Q is a little chunky by today's standards, but for the time, it was impossibly thin. And even by today's metrics, it's very, very light at 115 grams. When I first saw one in the wild, it was being slid into a back pocket. I imagined trying to do the same with some of its contemporaries and laughed a lot. While the slick looks and light weight served it well, the Q wasn't without its limitations. Windows Mobile 5 for smartphones was a powerful platform, but it didn't always run snappily on the Q's processor, a 312 MHz Intel X-Scale. Also, the tiny 1130 mAh battery didn't offer the best endurance. And the non-touch display, while bright and sharp for the day, was also pretty small at 2.4 inches compared to its Pocket PC competitors. But the Q was never meant to be a powerhouse. It was meant as a prosumer-grade BlackBerry replacement. Look no further than the spacious QWERTY keyboard and the side-mounted jog dial. The Q replicated the BlackBerry layout perfectly, with scroll wheel on the right side and a back key placed directly underneath. Unlike a BlackBerry, though, these controls were augmented by a 4-way D-pad and home, back, and send and end keys just below the display, giving the user a choice in terms of navigation. The jog dial on our unit here is broken, but when it did work, it was quite handy for scrolling web pages and emails and text messages. And the keyboard was actually pretty great for its time, though Windows Mobile's half-hearted predictive text and the tendency to drop the occasional character kept the Q from real messaging powerhouse status. Illuminating that keyboard was the same shade of blue as the electroluminescent backlighting on the Razr, completing the futuristic look of the Q. Our unit here is finished in the original silver, but Motorola would later release black and gray soft-touch variants, both of which looked very sharp. The Q includes many forerunners of today's standard smartphone features. A mini USB port instead of micro USB, a mini SD card slot instead of micro SD, a 2.5mm instead of a 3.5mm headphone jack, and even an IR port, an accessory that disappeared for a while but which is finally starting to make a comeback. There's no Wi-Fi on board, but the Q's radio does support EVDO, the high-speed data of 2006, when 3G was still as good as it got. This being a Motorola device, phone calling was a pleasure, and the speakerphone was loud. And the build quality was high enough that you could toss the Q around without worrying too much about jarring a button loose or busting the battery door off. The 1.3 megapixel camera produced okay photos for the time, which could be shared via MMS or email. Remember, this was before mobile Facebook and Twitter took off. The Q launched on Verizon at a non-contract price of $199.99 after rebates. Very reasonable, considering everything packed into its tiny frame. It would later go on to other carriers, and it would unfortunately develop a somewhat spotty reputation in user reviews. It's likely the return rate on this device was pretty high. But if you were willing to put up with its quirks, there were definitely good units to be found. I carried mine for a solid year, something of a personal record. Before the summer of '06, many people still associated Windows smartphones with big, clunky, stylus-laden monsters built only for the geek squad. With the Q, Motorola changed all that. It built a slim, super stylish smartphone with a great keyboard, a bright display, and a BlackBerry-beating feature set that satisfied all but the most hardcore mobile mavens. The Q played a huge role in consumerizing the smartphone in 2006. No small feat, and one that deserves not just a nostalgic look, but our continued respect. Folks, that's going to do it for this episode of the Pocket Now Throwback. Hope you enjoyed it. To see our videos as soon as they go live, subscribe to our channel, follow us on all our social media feeds, Drop us a like if you enjoyed this one. Leave a comment if you have something to say or a fond memory to share about the Q. And thank you for watching. As always, we'll see you next time.